Everybody. Good afternoon officially. I'm Steve Gregorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. Welcome to today's meeting. 91 years of incredible speakers and networking, and that tradition continues today. I especially want to welcome our DEC members, and if you're not a DEC member yet, just give me 10 seconds to convince you. Your next job, prospect, client, best friend is probably in this room. So if you want to build your network and learn from thought leaders on our stage, we invite you to invest in yourself and join us today. You can do that at econclub.org. And we can sweeten the pot. If you want to sign up today on your way out at the registration desk, we'll give you a free ticket for any event we've got through June. So let's get started. I would just ask you to please take a moment to silence your cell phones. And while you're doing that, if you've been with us before, you know we always begin by honoring our country with a pledge and a prayer. So please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And kindly remain standing. Our invocation today will be delivered by Pastor Hamilton from North Ridge Church in Plymouth. Pastor?
Thank you, Steve. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here together with so many wonderful, amazing, and influential people in this room. God, an invocation is meant to ask, make a request of authority. And God, we know that authority belongs to you, and so we ask for your wisdom and your discernment, especially on a day like today with a topic like we're covering. God, I'm reminded that your first command to humanity is to be fruitful and multiply, to subdue the earth and exercise dominion over it. But God, not in a way that's natural for us to do it, but like you do it. You've asked us to be stewards of this world that you have blessed us with. God, help us to do that and pursue that in a way that is not like what comes natural to us. Not in a way that comes out of our pride or our desire for power, but God, in a way that flows out of a humility that leads us to truly serving others in how we lead. Pray that that's reflected in who you are as we meet together and talk together today. And it's in the name of Jesus I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. You may all please be seated. A couple of thank yous as we get started. Thanks to WGR, who's doing their focus show live from today's DEC meeting. You can stop by and see them afterwards. I also want to say thank you to WDIV Local 4, Detroit PBS, Rich Homburg, thank you, and LTU for live streaming today's meeting. And a special thank you to those of you who donated your clothing that Focus Hope will put to good use, helping their students enter the workplace. I understand we got over 60 to 75 suits donated, so we'll put those to good use. Congratulations. All right, students are here today and always, courtesy of our generous corporate sponsors. They had a morning session already with Patty. I want to let you know who was with us. We've got students from Schoolcraft College, thanks to Jim and Dow. International Academy of Macomb, thanks to Accenture, Adam Robbins, thank you. Lawrence Tech University, thanks to Ford Motor Company. St. Catherine's High School, thanks KPMG and Jacqueline. And two groups from the Manugian School, compliments of Davis and ITC Holdings, thanks Davis and Simon, and Strather and Associates. So how about joining me in a round of applause to thank the sponsors and welcome the students. Quickly, a couple things on your table, our seasonal lineup. Later this month, we will be hosting U.S. Senator Gary Peters. You'll get that announcement soon in your email, and we're working on lots of things that you'll be seeing very soon this week and the next couple of weeks for April, May, and June. Also on your table is our corporate sponsor brochure. I can never, ever, ever thank them enough. They are the reason we exist and can bring you a program like today. So if you're part of that sponsor group, thank you. If you'd like to be, we'd like you to be as well. So just come and talk to me afterwards. All right, 91 years of speakers I mentioned, and those speakers tell the history of our great country. And Patti, you now join a distinguished list of 16 others who graced our stage on this day, March the 3rd. So let me just tell you, some of those are. Back in the 40s, we had a couple of World War II military leaders. In the 80s, U of M President Shapiro and MSU President DiBiagio in the 80s here. 1997, Robert Johnson, founder of Black Entertainment TV. The recently retired Senator Stabenow on this date in 2003. And listen to this one, 2017, the Economy Secretary of Mexico. I think it was right here in this room. And man, oh man, would he be interesting to listen to today, right? Yeah. So today we're pleased to add you as our 17th speaker on this day in DEC history. So congratulations and thank you for being with us. And finally, we want you to use your smartphone to be involved in today's program, take lots of pictures, share with your social media networks, and also you can submit a question for Patti using the QR code on your table, and those questions will make their way to our presiding officer, who I'm about to put to work. Tricia Keith is the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. She's an amazing supporter of the DEC and me personally. Tricia is an amazing supporter as well, and will continue that Blue Cross tradition of doing so much for so many in our city, region, and state. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tricia Keith.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It is my honor to serve as the presiding officer today here at the Detroit Economic Club among so many friends. I do really want to acknowledge the critical role that the DEC plays in the community, in the economy, and in bringing us all together for all of the partnership, all of the business, and very importantly, this friendship as well. It's my honor today to be able to introduce Patti to you. So many of us know her. By a show of hands, I'm curious, how many people are here because they've had some type of personal relationship with Patti over time? I see a lot of hands in the air, and I think it's indicative. Thank you for coming. I think it's indicative of her impact that she's had here and why we have such a great turnout today. I think we all know her as a dynamic and influential leader. She's a visionary CEO of Pacific Gas and Electric, one of the nation's largest utility companies. But we're very proud also of the fact that she has deep Michigan roots here as well. She had years as the CEO of CMS Energy, which is the parent company of Consumers, and also prior to that time with DTE. She has a bachelor's and a master's degree in industrial engineering from Purdue, and a master's in management from Stanford. That was very important at the PG&E interview, I'm sure. Obviously, she serves on many other industry boards, including the Edison Electric Institute and the Electric Power Research Institute. Her passion for people, though, is what's really making a difference, and her passion for what she's going to talk about with us today. And then a personal note of privilege, I would tell you, as a newly minted CEO, she was one of the first people to reach out to me and congratulate me, and I appreciated that so much. And in the spirit of how she leads, she was very generous when I asked her for her advice on what she most learned in her early days as CEO, and I've taken a lot of that to heart. So thank you so much for that. It's my pleasure also to introduce to you Jim Fitterling. Jim is the chair and CEO of Dow, and Jim will serve as moderator today. Patti and Jim are great friends. They have a shared passion for energy transition, but they're great people as well, and we're very much looking forward to the conversation. So Jim, thank you also for your deep support of the Detroit Economic Club, and I would invite the members of the Economic Club and our guests today to welcome Patti and Jim to the podium with their applause. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you,
Great
Jim.
to see you.
Great to be here.
So we're just going to, while you're all having lunch or finishing dessert, we're going to catch up. It's been a while since we've talked, but you have a lot to talk about, I think, in this world that's changing in front of us. And Patti, as was mentioned by Tricia, she's a good friend and a colleague. We've talked a lot about energy transition over the years, but also her passion for people and how to lead organizations to get outstanding financial results, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. So let's just talk a little bit about your journey first and what led you to PG&E. You started in General Motors before you went to DTE and then CMS, and then ultimately took the job at PG&E, and I'd like to hear what that transition's been like and what are you learning there?
Well, I definitely am learning a lot, but I must admit it is such a pleasure to be back in the D. I've told several people my daughter got married this year, and of course no better place than Detroit to have a wedding. So she got married and we celebrated at the Shinola, and the town was just sparkling. I just need you to know Detroit stands up as a role model, as a great city with a great heart and a beautiful place to be. So, you know, my career, I've been an operator my whole career. I started in General Motors and worked in the assembly plants, and then went to the utilities and worked in the power plants, and then had the privilege of going to my hometown in Jackson to be the CEO there for, I was at CMS for 10 years, but for 5 of those years I was the CEO at the company my dad retired from. I lived 2 doors down from him, and it was a very proud time for our family, and what a great opportunity to run a great company. And I learned so much at Consumers and DTE, and combined with my experience at General Motors, puts me in a very unique nexus as the nation and the world is, you know, working and shepherding through the climate adaptation and change, and learning how to build infrastructure for purpose, and the ability to leverage electric transportation to decarbonize the economy, puts me in a unique position. And so in California, it's very much top of mind. Extreme weather has been devastating in our state. I feel like we live on the front line of the effects of climate change. I will say no safer place to be than Michigan. When you look at the catastrophe maps, you've all made a wise choice.
Right. Absolutely.
But it's been, everything I learned here, I feel prepared me for a time such as this in California.
For a lot of reasons, right?
For a lot of
Electricity and water. When you moved to PG&E, there were so many things that were similar about your experience here in Michigan. You were dealing with infrastructure grid that needed to be updated. PG&E had its own issues with fires, and of course now we've seen what happened in LA area with Pacific Palisades and what happened there. Maybe not the same genesis as what you dealt with when you went to PG&E. What's happening, you know, in the service areas, like what we see out west and what's happening in the service areas? What are those challenges that you have to face, and how did some of the things you learned here instruct what you're doing out there?
Yeah. Well, someone did trick me when they just said, it's just a utility, Patty, you know. And then I got there and I'm like, oh, no. We have a lot of challenges in California with the extreme weather conditions, and particularly as it relates to wildfire, extreme drought, and then high winds, highest winds ever. So in Southern California earlier this year, when those fires broke out in LA, it was the highest sustained winds. It was hurricane sustained winds for multiple days. It wasn't like it blew through. It was multiple days, combined with the fact that LA had not seen rain since March the year before. So extreme drought, extreme winds, anything that sparks can spread, and the ember cast then that cast over the homes and the community was not prepared to deal with that extreme of the conditions, and you all saw what happened. And so at PG&E, PG&E service area goes from Oregon to about Santa Barbara, about 2/3 of California. We have heavily forested areas and then extreme urban centers. And then, of course, I have the privilege of serving the large tech companies in the heart of Silicon Valley. But what we've learned is that we must build infrastructure for purpose and prepare our communities for these incidents. And so, for example, I have over 100 former firefighters and 30 former fire chiefs on staff at PG&E who help us design our safety and response systems so that we can make sure that we're where we need to be and we're building infrastructure. Now, you take that as like the human input to a system, and then you combine it with an incredibly data-rich set of technologies. We have weather stations all over our service area. We've broken our service area into 2,000 or 2-kilometer polygons, and in every polygon we know the wind speeds, the fuel moisture levels, the humidities, the temperatures, the grass crop. We know if we have a tree within strike distance to our lines. We know if we've inspected that line. We have a record of what we saw when we inspected that. That in huge data engine then is informing an AI-enabled response engine that tells us what actions to take when, real time. I have a command center where highly talented meteorologists monitor full-time every day with those firefighters to determine where are we at risk and what do we need to do to be prepared so that risk does not turn catastrophic. That is not a regular utility. Nope. I will just say, I did not learn that in Michigan. But what I did learn is that people and innovation can solve the biggest problems. And so we took a stand that catastrophic wildfire shall stop. And we are unrelenting in our pursuit of that. And so I think I did learn courage and grit here in Michigan that I've taken with me.
So there's a lot of change. Like we talk about the energy transition, I think most people think about moving to lower carbon emission forms of energy. We talked here a lot about wind and solar. You've got challenges, obviously. You're talking about putting a grid underground, which is big infrastructure dollars. At the same time as the economy moves to electrify more things, EVs being part of that, but many other things will be electrified. You've got to keep up with peak demand. And so on the generating side, the utilities are built to peak demand because you got to keep people warm in the winter and cool in the summer. How do you balance all that capital demand and still keep people's bills affordable?
Yeah, that is the great puzzle, and that's what's fun to solve. We do think that, in fact, we know, and one of the things I definitely wanted to talk to this audience about is that the pathway to a decarbonized economy is, in fact, an economic choice. I think a lot of people believe, and there's a lot of conventional wisdom, that to make energy cleaner, it must be more expensive. When, in fact, when you look at economy-wide, what are the sources of carbon emissions? It used to be power generation was the #1 source of carbon emissions. That's not true anymore. Actually, because the nation transitioned from predominantly coal to natural gas and renewables and energy efficiency, I will add. Here in Michigan, when we retired our coal plants, we were able to transition to existing natural gas. We didn't have to build new infrastructure, and we transitioned to more and more renewables. Michigan has done that in a beautiful way, and we didn't do that because it was nice to do. We did that because it was economic to do. We were able to save customers and make energy more affordable while we were transitioning to lower carbon emissions. The same thing holds true today in California, particularly given that transportation is now the leading cause of carbon emissions. Nationwide, globally, and definitely in California, transportation is #1 source of carbon emissions. Leveraging the transition from internal combustion engines to electric transportation will solve the carbon emissions, and the grid needs the electric vehicles. And so I can, certainly we can talk more about that, but there's an economic path forward just at the highest level for our service area. Again, 2/3 of California. We can reduce our carbon emissions by 65 to 70% and simultaneously reduce every household's energy spend by 20 to 30%. And I want you to hear that. Carbon emissions down, energy spend down. There's no or. We don't have to make a sucker's choice. Either we're going to save the planet or have it be affordable. We are both going to save the planet and make it affordable. And I think there's a lot of misinformation about that specific story. And
you talked about transportation, but also heating and cooling buildings comes right after that, I think, in terms of uses. And then you get to industry. And when you look at that, obviously, a lot of homeowners are thinking about going off the grid or becoming less dependent on the grid. You still want them tied into the grid, right? Yes. Because they may have batteries in their home, or their car may be a battery. I remember when you moved out there, you talked about being able to reverse the flow out of somebody's EV to help out during peak demand. Is that working? Are people freaked out about privacy, like you're going to pull electricity out of my car?
No one's freaked out about that. In fact, they're happy to have first vehicle to home, and then ultimately vehicle to grid. So first, having, and I think General Motors and Ford have been leading automakers in making their vehicles able to power a job site or a home.
Yeah.
And that's an exciting technology that really works for my customers. They're excited to have that capability. And so I was at the GM Design Center this morning looking at their lineup, and the cars look great. And we need those EVs to enable a peak supply so that those vehicles today on the roads in my service area alone, first of all, let me just say, EVs are selling, and they're not just selling because somebody's making them. Buy them. So I just need that. People are choosing to buy electric vehicles. In Santa Clara County, for example, which is the county adjacent to my headquarters and serves Silicon Valley, 46% of new vehicles sold last year were electric. 28% of new vehicles sold in my entire service area, which is in some very, Lake Tahoe's in my service area.
Oh, yeah.
28% of new vehicles sold last year were electric because they're fun to drive, they're lower cost to own, and electricity is a more efficient fuel than gasoline. And so there's an economic case to be made. We don't have to make this transition because it's the right thing to do. I think we find that people might grow weary of that idea if it costs them more. But if every household can save 20 to 30% on your energy and have a more fun car to drive and provide peak power on a handful of days, 5 to 15 days a year, your vehicle can also serve as a little mini power plant for which we compensate you. That's a winning formula for decarbonizing the economy at a fundamentally lower societal cost. I'm very optimistic about that. Not because I'm optimistic, but because I get the math.
And the way you've designed those grids, those mini grids that you've got inside your whole infrastructure, I think fits with all that. You're actually in a great place to do this because you do have the data power and the brain power out there to make that happen. So the other transition that we're going through right now, in case anybody didn't feel it, is the administration. And I wonder, you've always been a climate optimist, and as we were talking about at the table, I've never heard this president say that climate change is a hoax. I don't hear that out of the administration. But clearly the climate is changing. We're living with it, and adaptation has got to be a part of what we do. A lot of what you mentioned is especially true with the younger generation. We heard the questions from the students today beforehand. They're seriously interested about how they can make an impact. So as a climate optimist, how do you view things from here moving forward? And what kinds of things that are happening with the administration are going to be challenging to what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, well, first I'd love to say the part that I think we have total agreement on, and that is that we do want to have energy that can power a growing economy. And so one of the things that surprises people is, as the power provider for the large tech companies, I have the privilege of serving, the Googles and Apples and Microsoft and Amazon have their cloud businesses, based in my service area, and we're able to serve that new demand for customers in a way that actually lowers everybody's bills. So here's some big numbers. I'll just geek out for just a tiny second. 1 gigawatt of new data center load is a lot. 1 gigawatt could actually produce enough revenue to offset the cost of building the infrastructure for that data center and save every customer 1 to 3% on their bills. So 1 gigawatt, 1 to 3% cost savings for every customer, all the residential customers. I have applications for 5.5 gigawatts right now. So we're talking about 5 to 10% energy cost savings. That's a transition that powers America's AI dominance. Darn straight America should be the leader in technology and artificial intelligence, and we're not going to concede that because we didn't have an energy system that's ready. So my team is on full-fronted attack to make sure that our grid is ready and enables a lower cost for every one of our customers. What an amazing thing. And then you combine that with EVs. For every million EVs, we can lower the bills another 2 to 4%. So we have plans to have 3 million EVs in my service area by 2030. That reduces cost for customers another 5 to 6% more on your energy bill. Every customer, whether they drive an EV or not, This means that the decarbonized, technology-powered energy system actually can be more affordable. And that's the thing that that's just the message that we need to get out, that there is a pathway forward to build the infrastructure that we need. Because listen, we were going to be rebuilding the grid anyhow.
For sure.
It's reached its natural age. So if I was simply building like for like, that would just cost more. But rebuilding a grid to serve more demand in a technology-enabled supply and demand equation that's more optimized means a more affordable energy system that is safer, more resilient, and is hardened for the new climate conditions.
And as you mentioned before, that base load, that data center and industrial power base load is very predictable and understandable. Yes. And it's that peak demand that comes from those extreme weather events that's really harder for you to predict. That's where the technology helps out.
And EVs and technology. So on these peak days, you might be surprised to know. For example, in my service area, it's not that dissimilar here in Michigan, our grid is utilized about 45%. It has a utilization of 45%. That surprises people because you've heard, oh, didn't they have, power outages or brownouts in California? Look, we had 2 situations where we came close. That peak is driven by residential air conditioning. That's it. It's not driven, data centers more fully utilize the existing infrastructure we have. We need a peak supply resource, and again, for us in California, that's 5 to 15 days a year. We see it growing to 15 days a year. It's about 5 days a year today. We can serve that with these EVs. And so when the EVs can be the peak power resource 5 to 15 days a year, not every day, but you get compensated for your vehicle being a source to the grid, that is an amazing utilization of an existing asset versus building a whole bunch of new power plants that have to be fossil fuel powered because they're so large. We can use these dynamic distributed resources to create a grid that is resilient to peak days, but it is decarbonized.
It's interesting that we're in a time where this, like if you planned it, the tech data center demand couldn't come at a better time for what you have to do, right?
It's a perfect time.
And I guess either side could take, credit for that, but it just happens when it happens, and you got to take advantage of it. Like you say, it's a shame as an engineer when you go in to replace something that's at the end of 30 or 40 or 50 years life, to replace it with the same thing, you look to yourself and say, have I really done a great job if I'm doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
The majority of your career was here in Michigan. California, Michigan, when you took the job at PG&E, I think I sent you a note and said, do you really know what you're getting into? So maybe compare and contrast a little bit, just how you're dealing with the quite different changes and demands that are put on you.
Well, I think the biggest change was this wildfire risk. That was a whole new realm. And I had one of our board members is a 4-star admiral, and I was probably, 4 or 5 months in to the job and realizing what had happened here and what was going on around me and how scary it was. And I thought to myself, like, who would understand? Like, this isn't like a profit and loss quarterly earnings job anymore. This is something else. And I thought a military man might understand because it felt like a military operation, what we were building at PG&E to fight wildfire. And so I called my admiral, and he said, oh, Patty, I should have given you this talk right away. I give it to all my young commanders. I'm like, whatever. I'm feeling older than that right now, but please let me hear it. And he said, look, every great military mission had 2 things in common. Number 1, they had setbacks. It's not going to be a straight line here. Things are going to go wrong. And he said, and number 2, they had a leader who refused to give up. So I buckle in every day, Jim, and I say to myself, here we go. We're gonna change how energy is delivered fundamentally to make it safe from the hazards and the extreme weather that causes catastrophic wildfire. I have a brilliant team who literally every minute of every day is learning and implementing and changing and using the best and brightest technologies. It's incredible. We have the best partners across the globe. And we're preparing now to get to the root cause of why is the weather so extreme? Let's get to the root cause. We have to adapt to the changing climate, make sure we have infrastructure for purpose, as I like to say, combined with really delivering a decarbonized energy system that is part of a decarbonized society that leaves a planet for our children and our children's children. And I tell you what, there's nothing better than that. And I guess maybe some of that grit and, you know, my years in the assembly plants of General Motors taught me to like just be tough and don't give up. And I take that to my daily mission now.
You talked about natural gas, which was a big part of the change here in Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, the ability to move to natural gas, which has half the emissions, if not less, depending on the technology. And now nuclear, because you know, you've got Diablo Canyon in your territory, so you've extended the license on that. Here, Palisades is going to go for a new license and come back. And they're talking about 2 small modular reactors here. How does nuclear fit into this?
I think nuclear is an essential ingredient to the decarbonized economy. It's carbon-free energy. We can manage the waste that comes from a nuclear process. Small modular reactors will bring new and different methods at a smaller scale so people feel more equipped to build these nuclear power plants. Operating a nuclear power plant is one of the most humbling opportunities that I have. It is such an extremely talented workforce with an extremely high expectation of themselves and their professionalism. Because the risk of a nuclear incident is so high that any one nuclear plant that would have that risk, it's a risk to all of us. There is a fail-safe mindset and culture that has been created over the last 50 years, and we do all these audits and monitoring, inspections to confirm that we have the safest culture, equipment, people, skills, techniques, and that team, I would take any mountain, anytime with that crowd. They are not going to let you down. And the idea that we would retire a carbon-free asset that is that well run just doesn't make sense. And so we're optimistic that the state will see the potential and the benefits, especially with the growing demand from the data centers. So nuclear definitely plays a role in the future of the energy system globally.
And I think people need to feel like it is a safe technology. The Institute for Nuclear Power Operations is a fantastic organization that really makes sure that they're up to standard and really digs in and has a lot of authority over keeping the operation safe.
Yeah, they come and they do an audit at my facility every year. And what surprised me is they don't just focus on the equipment and the technology and the procedures, they focus on the culture. And the culture of performance at our nuclear fleet in the nation is extraordinary. These people, they have what we call fail-safe mindset. They assume their equipment will fail. They assume people will make mistakes. And so you have a layers of protection mindset. And we actually took that layers of protection mindset from our nuclear power plant and looked at our electric grid and said it now is a high-risk asset. A catastrophic event due to electric equipment is a catastrophic wildfire, just like a nuclear incident in a nuclear plant is catastrophic. Therefore, we need to learn everything there and apply it here, and which is what was the genesis of our layers of protection system that exist on our electric grid now. And that the whole industry is learning about. We hosted maybe 300 people from all different utilities across the country, including some folks from Michigan, came out to California last year. We held a summit and shared everything we've learned about wildfire science. What would we do differently this time around? You know, what are the right things you need to do first? And the industry is very much committed to, I'm going to be with my peers this week in Washington, D.C., talking with legislators about wildfire and wildfire risk and what's a national safety standard that we should be establishing, much like we have this national safety standard for nuclear.
That's great. I heard the new Secretary of Energy on stage a couple of weeks ago, and really fantastic understanding of the industry, but also all of the energy challenges, and not against anything, but like in favor, and a real deep understanding of what's a solution in one part of the country may not be the exact solution in another part, which I think is is a good build on where we were. I think there were a lot of good things done with the IRA and the infrastructure bill, I think some of which we will see continue.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good build that will serve us well.
I do agree. I mean, you, like a great engineer, knows you have to define the problem well. And the problem in Missouri might be different than the problem in California, might be different than the problem in Michigan or Florida. And so I think it is important that we not do blanket solutions, that we really think through what is the right energy system for these climate conditions, these customer usage profiles, et cetera, and we'll come up with the right answers.
So the Admiral was right. You are a young leader. And I don't know if you know this, but Patti has the distinction of being the only female CEO of 2 Fortune 500 companies. Did you know that?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know that. I'm hoping I won't be the last. There should be many of those out there, so I'm not quite.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you will. Something tells me you'll tackle this, and I think you have the characteristics, the 2 characteristics that he talked about. Talk to us a little bit about your way of developing that culture and working with your people, and just some of the principles that are important to you as you tackle your job and a new organization.
Yeah, when I came in to PG&E as a second-time CEO, I had the privilege of being a first-time CEO and having an opportunity to get a do-over. I got a mulligan, I guess. I'm sorry to all the consumers team in the house. I did better the second time around, but we had a catastrophe underway. I joined the company right after bankruptcy. We had the Camp Fire. You might remember this. The town of Paradise burned to the ground. 84 people died. PG&E had pled guilty to 84 counts of manslaughter. It was a very devastating time for our company. So I came in and I knew that we needed a lot of head and heart. And so we established a purpose that we're going to deliver for our hometowns, serve our planet, and lead with love. And that purpose, and I got a lot of eye rolls on the lead with love part, I will admit, but not anymore. We, in fact, take a survey. We might find this interesting, Jim. We knew we wanted to create a culture where people were safe to have the big idea, that they felt valued, because my coworkers did not feel safe or valued in that time, in that era. And so to give them a space where they could have the solutions, have the big ideas. We actually do a joy survey, and we ask 4 questions. Do you enjoy working at PG&E? Do you feel known? Do you feel loved? And do you feel proud working at PG&E? And this last year, 21,000 of my 28,000 coworkers took the survey, and over half of them, 54%, said they felt loved at work. And I think the world would be a better place if all people felt loved doing the work that they did every day. And I'm proud of the fact that 54, I'm not satisfied with that, but we're going to get to 100%. But somebody sent me a little note, and they said, Patti, I think that score on the love says that they're buying in to the change you're causing here. That to say you're loved at work means that you love being part of something really special. You love the opportunity to serve our friends, our families, and our neighbors. And so I think I was a little directive when I came to PG&E, because I knew it was a crisis and we had work to do. But what I didn't do is just think about the science and the technology and the rules. I wanted to make sure we had equal parts, head and heart, in our pursuit of doing some of the most important work that any of us could ever professionally have the opportunity to do.
And of course, you're going to spend the time where you need to in terms of the company and where it needs to go. But you're just as likely to be out with a line crew, talking to them, or in a plant operating control room, or out walking through a plant. And I think closing that gap between the folks that are on the front line and your job, which I think makes the biggest difference in the world.
Yeah, because they're going to have the answers. I'm not going to be able to tell them what to do at 2 a.m. in that power plant. And so I want to make sure that they know and have the tools and the support to do the right thing when no one's looking, to have the support and know that they should ask the question when they're not sure. You know, on the Lead with Love thing, one of the things that I'm very proud of is our progress on coworker safety. I say this a lot. I've had the unfortunate opportunity and obligation to attend the funeral of a coworker who died on the job. And when I arrived at PG&E, we were having a fatality every 90 to 100 days of a coworker. When you're at someone's funeral, the outpouring of love is overwhelming, but it is too late. And this was the message to the team. That is not the time to tell someone you love them. You missed the moment. The moment was on the job. The moment was when someone was about to do something you weren't prepared to do or you weren't quite sure and you didn't speak up. How dare you? That's the moment to show that you love. And so one of the fundamentals of leading with love at PG&E is speak up. And I am happy to report that on today's daily report, we're at 762 days since our last fatality, and we're going to keep on rolling.
My last question, because I think you speak to the importance of physical and psychological safety, which is, they go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand.
So my last question, before Tricia comes up for the Q&A, probably the most important question of the day. 49ers or still a Lions fan?
Well, you can bet I had Lions gear this year. I mean, didn't everybody? But no, I am definitely a Lions fan. But I will admit, truthfully, the 49ers are fun to love. They're a sweetheart team. I mean, Brock Purdy out of nowhere. He's a great team. George Kittle. Oh, yeah, they're a fun team to root for.
Patti Poppe.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
We're going to stay right here.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Patty. And audience, you all have been great in submitting a number of questions, some of which were submitted early, and I'm delighted that we were able to hit them in part of our discussion as well, and so we'll be able to get to a few more. So thank you for that, and I'm sure they will continue coming in. But so I guess I would start with, can we support the growing need for energy for EV, data centers, et cetera, with all green power? Or you talked a little bit about nuclear, or is traditional energy, coal, oil, gas, still needed in the mix? And can you address that?
Yeah, so I would say there is a transitionary period. Today, the energy that I delivered in 2024 was 98% GHG free. But that has the benefit of, I have a huge hydro system, and people forget about hydro as a very important resource with our nuclear facility. We do have some natural gas. I think natural gas will be an important bridge until hydrogen becomes more easily accessible before we really get the SMRs where we want them, and perhaps some large baseload nuclear facilities. So I think natural gas plays a role. I do think we have learned that you can replace coal with natural gas and energy efficiency and demand response in a very economic way, and we should continue to do that.
And I think you're going to see utilities building out some of that capacity on gas and nuclear and other forms. And then you're going to see industry playing a part, because sometimes the data centers want to build behind the meter and get access to that highly reliable, low-cost energy. So it's kind of a balance, depending on what part of the country you're in.
Yeah, and so we have, like I mentioned, the 5.5 gigawatts of data center demand. How are we going to serve that? The fact is, most of it can be served initially, especially like the first 3 gigawatts, with our existing grid, no new generation required, but we're using transmission to get the power where it needs to be. So we'll build transmission infrastructure in order to serve that new and growing load. And then we'll figure out what to do to make sure that we've got the right power resources. And one of the things, when you think about the peak, most of the data centers have a backup power, and right now they're using generally diesel generators for 100% backup. But that generator got built for that plant that matches the load of that plant and almost never gets used because the grid actually is so reliable. And we build to serve their peak supply. So my hypothesis is this: we are double building infrastructure. We should build a resilient grid that can island when necessary to be a backup generation for that individual site, but then can also, on a peak summer day, serve the grid. And so it has net benefits. And in that case, you could actually offset that natural gas peaking unit with renewable natural gas and have a net zero backup solution versus a diesel backup solution. So the point of all that, geeky gobbledygook that I just said is that we have new problems that can be solved with new solutions. And so just doing what we did, to your point, just replacing like for like what we had and just building it bigger is not necessary. We need to build it smarter and leverage the power of compute and technology and distributed resources to have a dynamic energy system that is, in fact, decarbonized.
Thank you both for that. I think one of the great opportunities we have here is your deep knowledge of Michigan as well as California. And so several questions around the topic of what competitive advantages does Michigan have in energy and sustainable clean energy transition?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say the presence of your automakers is a huge asset here, and really leaning into the power of our big three, or whatever we call them these days, I don't know. Same. Same, still call that, okay, good. But listen, GM and Ford in particular are way out in front on EV technology, and GM especially. I just think that we should lean into, don't fight that progress, but instead, that's a huge advantage to demonstrate a dynamic grid that can serve on an icy day. Let's make sure that we've got vehicles in our garages that can power our homes so our line crews can get out there and safely rebuild the infrastructure. That's a huge advantage that we can provide in combining energy and the energy system and our automakers and the vehicles into a much more dynamic grid. I think that's a huge advantage for Michigan.
Great, thank you. I feel like maybe you addressed this a little bit, but I think it also might be fun for you. So for the climate change skeptics, you get to bust one climate change myth that drives you crazy to hear. What would it be?
Yeah, that it's too expensive. I think that is a myth. It does not have to be too expensive. It has to be smarter. And we have the technology now, we have the capability now to make that transition smarter. Let me give you one example. We have Oakland Unified School Districts, which is Oakland, California, just electrified their bus fleet. So 75 new electric school buses that have the perfect match for the needs of the grid. So the grid is ready for these buses to come, and they provide 2.1 gigawatt hours of power throughout the year back to the grid. They actually are bidirectional, the buses. And so in the morning, the bus goes out, picks up the kids, comes back, charges up when we have excess power during the day because of solar, goes back out, does the run for the afternoon, comes back, still has excess power, plugs into the grid, and can provide power at the peak hours of the day. And to get on one of those school buses and have it be quiet until the kids get on, but it's quiet in your neighborhood and zero emissions. No stinky smell school bus going through a neighborhood and children breathing in that air every day. This is an economic choice that is what I call the triple bottom line with the big and, people and planet and prosperity. You can do all of those things at once. I feel like there's too much language around climate change about a sucker's choice. Like, either we're all going to wear sweaters and be cold and pay ridiculous energy bills and save the planet, or we're just going to leave that for another generation. No, we're going to save the planet and have the comfort and convenience that we want. But that's because there's brilliant people in the world who are tackling these issues every day.
Thank you. I think earlier, and you heard reference to this, Steve, Jim, and I got to hear the great questions that the students ask you in our student seminar prior. But there's a question here relative to future careers. And what opportunities will there be in energy for anyone considering the field?
Well, there are definitely lots of opportunities. As an engineer and a mother of two engineers, and I'm married to an engineer. We do have a bias, I think, in our house. So I'll encourage STEM careers, give you maximum opportunities. But truthfully, one of our biggest challenges is the human experience that our customers have with us. And if we're going to help homes transition from natural gas to electric, there's going to be a whole customer experience journey that is going to have to happen. And so we need people who understand people and people who understand marketing and messaging and communications. And of course, I'm always going to need finance people. And all the STEM careers you can imagine, we've always got a spot for you there.
Legal.
Oh, legal, I forgot that.
Skilled-
Hashtag love my lawyers, don't leave home without them. Yeah, I got lots of those.
Skilled
Yeah.
labor,
Yeah.
you name it.
Oh, yeah,
right?
skilled labor for
Government
sure.
affairs, I mean, dealing with the Public Service Commission's not easy.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun though. They're good people too.
Yeah.
But you know, I will say, and I should have said skilled labor because STEM includes. I would extend that to this careers. This happened. I was driving down the freeway. This was a difference in California. This is when I realized I was not in Michigan anymore. I was driving down the freeway. Actually, I was riding, and I looked up and I saw a helicopter up in the sky, and I thought, oh, I wonder if that's one of our helicopters, because we have a whole fleet. And then I looked closer and I realized there was a rope hanging from that helicopter, and there was a guy at the bottom of that rope, and he was getting dropped off on a transmission tower up on this mountaintop as I was driving down the freeway, and I thought, holy mackerel, kids don't even want to learn to drive. How am I going to find those guys? And they're
Exactly.
like, Patty, you can do it too. I'm like, no thanks, I'm not doing that.
You're going to have to go to an extreme ski resort to
Yes.
find them, or some
So if you,
skydiving
exactly,
school.
that's the skydiving school. That's a good idea. But it's an exciting career to be
Yeah.
in the energy business.
Great. So lots of opportunities there. And I think one of the signature features about the Economic Club is we close with lightning round questions for you. So very quickly, 5 questions. Patty, what is one of your favorite songs?
Well, anything Motown.
Okay. I got to clap for that. All right. What was your favorite sports team growing up?
The Pistons. I flunked accounting because the Pistons were playing the Bulls for their three-peat.
All right. Well, and I
did.
think
That
we get a
happened.
plug here. I think I saw that Arn was coming up to the Economic Club, so you all can register for that.
I
Great
was
answer.
a fan
They're
of
on
the
a
Bad
run.
Boys. You can all have your own opinion.
There
but
you
I
go.
was.
There you go. What was your first car?
Oh, I had a 1965 Plymouth Belvedere. Now, I was not driving in 1965, to be clear. It was 1986 when I got 1965 Plymouth Belvedere, but she was a beauty.
What is your favorite U.S. city to visit?
Oh, come on, Detroit.
All right, there we go.
Actually,
Get an applause.
I will amend the record. Grass Lake, Michigan, which is a beautiful place where I live out east.
Home, yes.
Yeah, out west from here.
All right, final question. What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
Yeah, you know, to find joy in the journey. There was the first half of my career, I think I was very focused on the destination, and maybe I wasn't having as much fun. And even when you're doing hard things, to find joy in the journey, I think should be all of our pursuit.
Words to live by. Excellent. So thank you both for that. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Steve. And I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Patty. We are reminded once again what a terrific leader you are. So great to see you. Thanks for being with us. We just don't want to see you dangling from a helicopter, please, all right? Jim, if that chairman and CEO thing doesn't work out for Dow, you can moderate DEC programs. We'd love to have you back. Thank you. And of course, Tricia, terrific job as our presiding officer, and we look forward to seeing you more at the DEC. So ladies and gentlemen, tell your friends and colleagues to join the Detroit Economic Club. We're a bunch of cool people. On time, every time. This meeting of the DEC is now adjourned. Thanks. Have a great week, everybody.